Thank you both for joining us. Lauren, I'll start with you. What do you expect the president to talk about? Who do you think the rally will help?
Well, it would really help Republican candidates if President Trump encouraged his supporters that the system is safe, it's reliable. Please get out there and vote because we have a Democrat in the White House. And if you care about my legacy and me, we need 2 Republican senators to protect those gains that we've made. I do not think that is the argument he will make. He's been still claiming election fraud on Twitter. He's really not incentivized from a personal standpoint because he's on his way out. But what would be best for the Republican candidates is if he urged his supporters to trust the system and to vote.
Bill, do you think that's what he'll do?
No. I would be very surprised. I don't know what Bill thinks.
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I'll say this, Lauren. I think you've got a good point as far as telling his supporters to vote, and they will vote. More than 900,000 mail-in ballots have already been requested. They will come out in droves, but the president can do 2 things. Number one, attack Chuck Schumer and say it is absolutely critical to keep the Republican majority in the Senate by electing Perdue and Loeffler again. That's number one. Number 2, he can attack the voter fraud issue by saying, look, they tried to steal it. We've got accounts all over the country of ballots being found under desks and little flash drives being handed off while someone was coughing. All of this stuff is still legit. However, voter fraud or not, none of it matters if we don't get a majority on election day. So he can stick to the fight. It doesn't really matter that the other lawyers are out there saying, don't trust the system, don't trust it. The bottom line is this, that what happened on election day and after election day in the presidential election is still true. It happened, and there are numerous accounts of fraud. That said, it's all being investigated. Has no bearing on whether or not Georgians should get out and vote on election day to keep the Republicans in charge of the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, because specifically in Georgia, this isn't the first time that they've had this problem where they've had allegations of fraud going on. And if you believe what you're told, they turned out in record numbers in 2020 versus 2016 when a lot of the issues came up and no one did anything about them. Lauren, what about that? I mean, the president does have to address it in some way.
I think he does. And actually, I think he needs to send a much stronger message than to say, come out and vote for me. I think he needs to directly address the allegations that it's a fraudulent system, because obviously, if you think about his supporters who genuinely believe this is fraudulent, they genuinely believe the outcome is already decided and they don't have any impact on it, he needs to address that question that they're asking. And that the only answer is, do not listen to these things. They are not true. We need you to vote. We need a Republican Senate.
I was curious. Well, go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say, to Lauren's point, I think he can, again, do both. When an election is very close, it's easier to commit fraud. What he needs to tell his supporters is, guys, get out there and overwhelm them. Have this be such an overwhelming win for our guys that they won't have a chance to steal it.
That's exactly what I think he'll do. And I think he'll leave people wondering whether he's going to say go out and vote, and he'll leave it toward the end, and then he'll say exactly what you're suggesting, Bill. Because the only way to beat that, he'll say, is to get out there and show them. Right. Lauren, I'm kind of curious, as somebody left of center, and that's one of the reasons we like having you on to share your thoughts. What you think of what
I am. Okay.
We love having you on just because of your intelligence and personality as well. What do you think about some of the things that are happening right now? Does it give you pause for concern? Wisconsin, I got to tell you what happened yesterday. It looks like they said, bring this back after you go through the lower courts. Pennsylvania, there's some traction there with some of these things. In Georgia, there's some debate as whether there was legitimacy. We saw some tape that put some questions out there. What is your feeling? Is this just all a done deal, or do you have any second thoughts about what's going on in this process?
Well, I think in any election, we find handfuls of fraud. We find cases. That's typical of any widespread election. And certainly there are handfuls of cases in this election we can point to, or cases of human error we can point to that we can do better on next time. But there is just simply no evidence that the scale of fraud needed to overturn the results of this election exists. And I really don't look at this from a partisan standpoint. I'm personally a Republican. I read all the research on election fraud. I know people who have done natural experiments. I know people who look at all of this very closely. And I trust them and I trust our judicial system. And I don't think conservative judges and Republican appointed judges in this case on the federal bench are part of some conspiracy.
Bill, that brings up one of actually my concern, and we've discussed this plenty. You know, you use the words typical for any election. You have these small elements of fraud here and there, but there's no widespread fraud to turn over this particular election. But my problem is that when we're using words like that, typical and not widespread, that we've attempted to normalize these problems.
I hate to
and
do
now
this,
we're here.
but we've got literally 30 seconds left in the show.
I thought he said 2 minutes.
So I don't know if you were able to answer that in 15, Bill, but take a shot.
Really quick, there absolutely is enough evidence that there are enough votes out there that could overturn the election for sure. But the bottom line is, it is not about whether or not there's enough to overturn the election. We have to get to the bottom of it to ensure the integrity of our system going forward.
Very nicely done by a radio guy. And Lauren and Bill, thank you both for being with us. And thank you folks for being with us on American.
Great to see you guys.
We need more.